Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back, comfortably zoned with the Zig Zag Man in Alameda, California. And when I say we, I'm here with Jerry Feitelberg, who has become part of this more than anybody, because he not only lives in Alameda, but he's one of the few people in Alameda who's worth conversing with. How about that? That sounds like a backhand compliment, but if anybody has been listening to my podcast over the years, you know that's it's not in any way. I love your company, Jerry, both in person and on the air. And let's talk what's on your mind right now. What is most prevalent in the world? Is it Afghanistan? Is it COVID? Or is it the Oakland A's?
Okay, well, right now, thank you for having me on the show once more, Ralph. It's always a pleasure to do the program with you. And before we start, I'd like to give a big shout out to our dear friend Nancy Finley down in Austin, Texas. Nancy's husband Morgan had a very unfortunate accident where the family dog was outside the house and long, and the critter was a baby rattlesnake, and it bit Morgan on the finger, and he had a hard time with that. You know, he had to recover, and he got anti-venom, but he's on the mend, and I just want to say hello to Nancy and Morgan, and hope you're listening to the podcast.
Oh, that's a wonderful hello. And Morgan, you shouldn't scare us like that. You're a friend of the show, and we need all the friends we can get. Jerry, you scare me too. You're going to have impending back surgery.
Yeah, I'm going to have L2 fixed. It's going to be a fusion, and it will be my third operation to fix my back. I'm very confident of my surgeon, and hopefully I'll only be in the hospital for 4 to 5 days. It's going to be minimally invasive, just a 2-inch incision, and it's going to take a little bit because he has to undo some of the work that he did before to get to be able to repair the disc that's no longer, there's nothing there. So there's no cartilage there, there's nothing, no cushions. So they got to fix it. And then after the 4 or 5 days in the hospital, he doesn't really want me to go to a nursing home, so they're going to, if I can walk around pretty good on my own, I'm going home to, I'll be home with Isla, and on the road to recovery. It should take a couple of months, but we still can do the podcast because it's still going to be watching.
Absolutely. And I know you're in good hands because you've talked about your doctor's capability. Why don't you give him a plug, because it's a small world.
Yeah, my doctor's name is Dr. Paul Slosar. That's S like in Sam, L-O, S like Sam, A-R. He's an orthopedic spine surgeon. His office is in Daly City on 455 Hickey Boulevard. And he is a terrific surgeon. He really did a wonderful job fixing me up the first time when I had the 2 operations 3 days apart in March of 2014. And he fixed me up, and 8 or 9 months later, I was on a cruise from Athens to Mumbai. Walked all over the place, no problem. So did a great job, and he really is a super surgeon. So if anyone has the back issues, contact Dr. Slosar. And I think his phone number is 650-985-7500.
And your troubles will be behind you.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so for anybody that has back issues.
My Tally has some back issues and muscle strains and all that, and nerve this and that, and I could tell you it's no fun. So maybe this guy can help, and who knows. Jerry, let me. The topics that I mentioned are Afghanistan and how about Roe v. Wade? We have so much shit going on. Besides the floods in the east, the climate change. This has been a nightmare. Tell me how you think Biden handled all this thing. What would you give him as a rating?
Well, Biden did the right thing by ending the war. He was right. He was the fourth president.
No question. No question
about it. The way it was done was very messy and chaotic, and that unfortunately cost him some points in his approval. And now that we're out of there, most of the Americans, I think there's a small amount of Americans left in the country. Most of the Americans they got out 120,000 people in such a short time. I think in 3 or 4 months, no one will be even talking about Afghanistan. So that's number one. Number two, the floods. That storm came up. Yeah, Hurricane Ida came up so fast. It hit the Gulf Coast with 150 mile an hour winds, tremendous amount of rain, but it moved fairly quickly through the area, and there was relatively very little damage and very few deaths in the Louisiana, Mississippi area, and then it turned and went northeast and it clobbered New Jersey, New York, went up to Massachusetts, and New York was a disaster. New York City, we saw the pictures of the subways being flooded. The
buses running and floating along Queens Boulevard, close to where I grew up. It's very, very eerie. Worst floods ever. Yeah,
and a number of people died in their basement apartments. They were flooded and they couldn't get out. It was just horrific. So the last big storm that hit the East Coast, Hurricane Sandy, where it destroyed Seaside, New Jersey, which is adjacent to Tom's River. I was there a year after Sandy, and they were repairing the boardwalk in Seaside. It wasn't 100% open. And when Isla and I went on a cruise in December of 2012, and we flew from here to JFK, and we were catching an Air France flight to go to Paris, and from Paris we were going to Spain, where the cruise was starting. Well, when we got to JFK, in order to get over to the terminal where the Air France plane was taking off, we could not use the shuttle that they have because the subway was flooded there from Hurricane Sandy. So we had to go up and use it, get taken over on the street to get over to the terminal. But that was the only thing that I saw from Hurricane Sandy. Sandy dropped a tremendous amount of water, but nothing like Ida. Ida was the worst. And now you're talking about climate change. There's no question that there are many, many people who are quite concerned about what's going on. I'd like to remind people of the movie An Inconvenient Truth that Al Gore did in 2006. He won an Academy Award for it. And in 2006, he was urging people to get off fossil fuels, utilize more renewable energy like solar, wind, get rid of coal, use as much as you can of the things that nature provides. And there was tremendous opposition from the Republican Party then. There's still opposition. There are a lot of climate deniers in the Republican Party.
Well, and don't you know that Trump said that windmills cause cancer?
Windmills kill cancer, and they kill all these birds, the poor birds, right?
Right.
And he was more concerned about that than the health and welfare of the people in general. And that showed in his lack of concern when the coronavirus hit. we could talk about an hour for all his misdeeds as president. But there are people out there who are listeners who probably support him, so we don't want to piss them off. We'll just talk about it.
The way to do it is to piss him off. Call him an idiot, and that. No, we're not going to change anybody's mind, but this is cathartic for us, and I hope that the way we word things can help the intelligent people out there who just have a hard time putting their thoughts into words, a way to explain it to people who are on the fence. We're not going to convince the people who are Trumpites or anti-vaxxers or any of that stuff. They're retarded. And in a sense, it's all natural selection. And the vaccine thing is a good example. 99% of people that are in the hospital for COVID these days didn't get vaxxed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there were 3 right-wing broadcasters who are anti-vaxxers, and they're dead now. So much for their freedom.
But if you only knew how sick I am, that I get such pleasure out of that. That's the irony is incredible, and that's natural selection. Because in 200 years, the average IQ, because of all of this, of the country, of the world, will have risen because the survivors are the small ones. And the stupid ones that won't get vaccinated and end up regretting it a lot of times, or after they're in the hospital, well, how about the people you took with you? How about the cost of medical stuff that you occurred to society? I mean, these are sociopathic people at this point. If you walk around, and especially the kids and the school boards and the fighting and the craziness over masks, what has happened to society? I mean, it's come to this that I'm the voice of reason. Well, a man like me, you understand what I'm saying? I can see this stuff so clearly, and I am what I am. Then God bless this world. I don't really.
You make some good points, and what's really amazing is how stupid the Republican Party is, because there's a large percentage of the Republican Party that will not get the vaccination. And so that means that those that get it, there's a good chance they will die. And you know what that means? They won't be around to vote for the Republicans. They're killing their supporters.
That's how stupid they are. That they don't see. That is the basic tenet of it all. You want them to breed and multiply and be healthy, if that's what it is. And you know what is right up there with the stupid group of people? The evangelists. And I'm hoping there are some Christian missionaries learning to speak Afghani at this point.
Well, and I've heard several of the evangelicals say, Jesus will save me. Jesus will save me. No, Jesus is not going to save you. The vaccine is going to save you. Now, and so you can believe whatever you want. If you think Jesus is going to save you and you're going to get sick, you're going to die. I'm going to tell you a little anecdote. This is a true story, and it involved Isla and myself. In mid-August, Isla's cousin and her new husband, who live in Nevada, came up to visit. And we did everything right. We wore masks when we went out. We went to restaurants. And the last dinner that we had with them was on August 15th at a restaurant in Palo Alto. They left to go home early on the 16th. Isla got a call last Sunday Now, so that you got to figure from August 15th to September 3rd is 16 and 3 days, 19 days. Isla got a call from her cousin on Sunday that she and her husband weren't feeling well and they had these symptoms. And they went to the doctor, and both of them had COVID-19. They both had been vaccinated, but they were both feeling crappy. And we talked to them today, and they're still not back to 100%. So we had to backtrack. The reason I know the days is we had to backtrack because it was 15 or 16 days since we had seen them. I sent a note to my doctor in Alameda, and they said, well, if it's been 14 or more days since you saw them and you have no symptoms, you're okay. So we were concerned. We were going to get the test, but we're doing fine. We're both of us are doing fine. So that was a concern. And then, of course, I have to have a COVID test before I have the surgery. So, but that's not a big deal. So it does happen, and it happens to people. And it probably happened when they went back to Las Vegas. They like to eat out in restaurants a lot. And they live in Clark County. And the infection rate in Clark County is 650 cases a day, compared to that in San Mateo County of about 130 cases a day. So the risk was much greater in Clark County than it was here. So I'm pretty sure they picked it up on their arrival home in Las Vegas. So it happens, and it happens to people you know. You just hope that they're going to make it through. Fortunately, they were vaccinated, and that's saving their lives. So anyone that's not vaccinated,
if you've been vaccinated, the chances are, if you do get sick, it'll be relatively mild, and it's unlikely that you will go to the hospital and or die. So
well, they got pumped through with the monoclonal antibodies the other day, but had they not been vaccinated and they got it, I bet you one or both of them may have kicked off because they were really affected by it. So you cannot take this. It's the variant that's very deadly, and you cannot take it lightly. And if there are any anti-vaxxers out there, they're not conservatives. They're libertarians. They think that they can do anything, that laws apply to other people. They think they can change the laws to secure minority rule in this country. And once you do that, you have fascism. Hitler took over with what percentage of the vote in 1933 in Germany? He didn't have a majority. When they had the Reichstag fire and the chancellor resigned, they elevated him to Führer or chancellor, and the result was, how many million people died in World War II? 60, 70 million people, because a minority took over and inflicted their will on their people, and they wanted to inflict it on the world. So what Texas is doing is a harbinger of what will happen to the country if we don't wake up and get the legislature to do what it has to do. There's one thing that Democrats have to do immediately. They got to grow a spine and a set of balls. They got to do this to save the country. After that disgraceful decision by the court to not order a temporary injunction on the Texas SB 8, which got around the Constitution by saying private people conspire on their neighbors, and if they do, they get a $10,000 reward. They made them bounty hunters. So the Supremes didn't even consider it. They wanted to go through the legal process of the courts, the appellate courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. That could take 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, women in Texas will not be able to get an abortion. So that's one thing. The thing that they can do is expand the court to 13 members immediately. I know that they have to get rid of the filibuster, but grow a pair of balls, do it, and where does
that come from? Would that come from Biden?
No, Biden is reluctant to do it. It's going to be his advisors that are going to have to put it on, and friends of the Democratic Party, people like Glenn Kirshner, Chuck Rosenberg, lawyers who are on TV, who have a platform who can help get the ball rolling to get it. There are 13 circuit courts in the country, and each one is handled by a Supreme Court justice. Well, if you have 13 courts and 9 justices, that means one or two judges have more on their plate to handle all the work. So it makes sense to have 13 Supreme Court justices. Plus, there's no
good way of putting it, Jerry. Good way of putting it. Great way of putting it.
There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to have 9 justices. They've had as little as 5 and as many as 10. And on the appeals court, you can have more appeals courts. You can get more judges in. Or if you've ever done a case, like I did the drug case back in 1993, it took us until the year 2000 to get everything done. 7 years. 7 years, and to get it. And we went to Chicago. We went to Chicago several times to appear in Judge Kokoris' court, the federal district court in Chicago.
Let's start from the top on that. Tell everybody what that was about and your role in it, please.
Yeah, in 1993, I was the first plaintiff in the country, and I was working with 3 other gentlemen. Fred Mayer, who was a very active pharmacist in California. He owned a pharmacy in Sausalito, and he had a side business called Pharmacist Planning Service Incorporated. And he was an advocate for small business all his life, and especially small people who had pharmacies that were small business. The other was a public activist attorney, Lynn Carmen, who had sued Bank of America and got a very large judgment for his plaintiffs. He was there, and he did a lot of public access courts. In fact, Lynn and I, every year, the state of California by law has to have a balanced budget by July 1st. And if they didn't have the budget, they stopped paying providers, everybody, because they weren't authorized to do it. So no pharmacies, doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, labs, nobody got paid. And we would file suit every year. And some years, we had to pay our bills. And I had to pay my wholesaler something every 15 days. And I was doing $100,000 a month of business with the wholesaler. And that would have to come out of my pocket, so I didn't get charged the penalty for not paying on time. Fortunately, the wholesaler knew what was going on, and they waived the penalties. But we're not banks. It's not our responsibility. The state took on this program, and they were required to do it. And we sued every year. Finally, the Fed said, in one of the suits, we said, you're getting federal money, and it's coming into the state. The state's paying, the Feds are paying half, and you're paying half. You cannot hold back paying these people. So they created a $2 billion fund to pay the people, the providers, the pharmacies, doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, to keep going until the yo-yos up in Sacramento could get their act together. And why couldn't we get a budget? Every year the Republicans would throw in anti-abortion laws, and it would just stymie everything, and they couldn't get anything done. They'd throw monkey wrenches in it. So finally we got it paid, and that was a godsend. But the drug case in Chicago, it was a national case, and along with Lynn Carmen, Fred Mayer, we hired the former mayor of San Francisco, Joe Alioto, who was once the premier antitrust lawyer in the country.
How did you come to get together with him? Because
Fred Mayer put it all together. Mayer put it together. And at the same time, coincidentally, the San Francisco Chronicle had done a story about with me about the number of independent pharmacies that were disappearing in the Bay Area, and my picture was in the business section with the whole story, and a lawyer for another famous Bay Area attorney, Joe Cochette, came in and said, "How'd you like to work with Joe Cochette?" I did not know that Fred Lynn and other pharmacists were meeting with Joe Alioto. And I called Fred and told him that we was approached to go meet with Joe Cochette. And he said, "Well, I'm working with Joe Alioto. We're having a meeting. Why don't you come?" So I went into the meeting, and there were 11 or 12 pharmacy owners there. And Fred goes through the whole thing, and he explains what he does. And when push come to shove, there was only one person who was willing to be the plaintiff, and that was me. So, the other guys all got cold feet. They were afraid that, they were going to come after you, and they were assured they're not going to come after us. This is what's going to happen. Is this is going to become a super class action. So I felt very comfortable doing that, and we got another guy. We filed 2 suits in federal court. And we filed a 3rd suit in state court. And what it involved was the multi-tier pricing schemes that the drug manufacturers had. And Joe Alioto's long career, he said he had never seen anything like the pricing structure that the drug manufacturers had. So it was like a Persian bazaar. And you have the Robinson-Patman Act says that if you buy 100,000 units of this at one price, they have to sell it to you for the same price. But it gets complicated because it's an exception for a nonprofit, and a lot of the hospitals are nonprofit. And while selling to the hospitals was not an issue, because let's say it's 10 or 20% of the market, the hospital, they're not competing with us. But what happened was there was a company called Medco formed around 1980, and they started calling doctors to switch drugs. They were in the same category of drugs. For example, if you had a high blood pressure pill like lisinopril, at that time there were 2 brand names of lisinopril, Prinavil and Zestril. So what Medco would do, if a prescription came in for Prinavil, they would substitute Zestril for it. They would increase market share for the drug, and when they had certain requirements that they had to meet, certain minimum requirements, and when they would meet those requirements, there was incentives, and they would get rebates after they moved quarterly or semi-annually for that. And they did this with many products, and with this, and in many instances, it wasn't maybe a 5 or 10% discount below what we were paying. In many instances, it was 80 or 90%. And they were using that, and what they would do when they would go out to bid for contracts, and we had a formula, and they would price it maybe 5% below what we were, but they're getting this huge amount of money. We're making pennies; they're making hundreds of dollars. And so we can't, and the insurance companies are paying us what they're paying them, but they're making handsome salaries. So, and that's why a lot of businesses go out, because the reimbursements, they kept cutting their reimbursements for the independent pharmacies. And in the year 2000, 2005, 2010, you're still getting the money that you would have been getting in 1920. That's your purchasing power. That's how bad it is. And so when you go into a chain pharmacy, you see a lot of people, because it's become a prescription factory. They have to do 600-700 prescriptions a day to stay in business. You can't get in these service rooms. You go in, you stand in line, you get your pill, they hand you a piece of paper and say, "Here, read about it. We can't talk to you about it." They're supposed to, but if they don't want to have a type of pharmacist, because they're so busy pumping out these prescriptions to survive. So anyway, our lawsuit.
Hey Jerry, I have a question on behalf of the consumer, and we all consume the medical benefits and what have you, and we all communicate with our doctors on what's being prescribed. And when I say communicate, I put that in quotes. the side effects of the drugs, whatever you're taking, aren't really discussed in the doctor's office. So how can our audience get the best from the pharmacist knowledge and experience? Does a pharmacist appreciate being asked about these things, or is it a pain to deal with the customer that way? You know what I mean?
No,
because you're going to have to, in some way, you ever come up against the doctor? You told my patient this and that, even if it's the truth. Is there ever a disagreement between doctors and pharmacists? Tell me about an example.
Yes. For example, you asked the pharmacist mind. When I was in business, I never minded. And one of the most important things when a person gets a new prescription, you have to explain to them what could happen. And side effects do occur, and when they do the testing for the drug, any side effect that occurs, it has to be reported in the literature when the drug gets approved. So yes, side effects can happen. Some and there are drug interactions that can happen too that can cause all kinds of problems. So those are the things that people want to know. And if you go to the same pharmacy, the pharmacist has all your records in there, and they have programs that pick up some drug interactions. Sometimes they're not really, they're textbook interactions, or people are only going to be on one drug for a short period of time. It's not really going to be a problem. So yes, side effects can happen, things that you should be aware of. Most of the common side effects are dizziness, upset stomach, but some can cause rapid heartbeat. So, and things like that, you have to, or blurred vision, drowsiness. These are things that can happen with any drug. And so you have to be careful.
Jerry, are you amused as am I when you hear a television commercial that starts out with or ends up with, tell your doctor about such and such drug? Shouldn't we be concerned about our doctor telling us what we need? But
absolutely. When the drug manufacturers got the ability to advertise on television, it became a free. They argued it was their free speech was being hindered, but a lot of doctors went absolutely apoplectic about it. Because when the manufacturers advertise on TV, it creates an artificial demand for the drug. The drug, at least people, if they went to the doctor and they didn't know about, I'm going to just pick a name as Humira, if they didn't know about Humira, and their doctor was prescribing something else, it interferes with his treatment of the patient. And a lot of times doctors will cave and they'll give them, and it might work, it might not work, but the demand has been created right by the manufacturer and the person who's got the particular problem, and will ask the doctor to give them Humira. So the patient is instead of the doctor doing the prescribing, the patient is, but the doctor is still responsible. So
right.
a lot of doctors will say they're not affected by the advertising.
I'm thinking that comes under the heading of natural selection, because I'm just smart enough to know that my doctor, who spent 8 years in medical school and practices every day and reads the journals, knows more about it than the guy producing the TV show, the TV commercial.
Right. But now a lot of doctors in the big settings like Kaiser and other hospitals, other in their practices, where they're taking Medicare, they have certain metrics that they have to meet in order to keep profitable. And it's a sad situation, and they really don't have time to go over with the patients for the drug side effects and interactions. And then they say, well, have the pharmacist explain it to you when they get there. The other side of the coin is that the pharmacists working in the big chains, they have metrics that they have to do too. Some chains keep track of how many prescriptions a pharmacist will fill in an hour. And if they fail to meet those metrics, they get fired. And they're not, it's just that because the economics, we didn't discuss what happens, when all these discounts that are going to the entities that are getting the special favors, the hospitals, the mail orders, the clinics, and now it's a lot of it. In order for the manufacturers to maintain their price margins, what do? They raise the prices to the general public. So people that are going to chains like Walgreens, Walgreens is they don't get special prices. They can make, they do a little bit better than the independent, but they really don't get special prices. So Walgreens,
I didn't know that.
CVS, Kmart, when they were doing it, they were all included in our class. And at that time, Kmart had 1,700 pharmacies. Walgreens has got over 4,000 pharmacies. CVS is a lot of pharmacies, tremendous amount of people working for them. And so that sector of the economy got hit with high price increases, and that was passed on to the patient or the patient's insurance company. So this was the thrust of the whole thing, that all these schemes that they have were hurting the consumer. One of the roadblocks we ran into in our case was a case that was settled and it was precedent. It was called the Illinois Brick case. And the Illinois Brick case dealt with a manufacturer who sold it at one price to a distributor. A distributor sells it to the home store that does like Home Depot, and the customer. The customer is the end user. And so they argued that because we bought it from a wholesaler charged us, we charged the customer or the customer's insurer that price. How were we harmed? We got all our money back. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was that our competitors had better prices and they were bidding for our business. And that was how we were being harmed. And the judge in our case said that we independent pharmacists act in the same or similar manner as the medcos or the pharmacy benefit managers, as they're called. We are entitled to the discounts. And there was an agency or a group that kept track of all our purchases, and so if we could move market share. And yes, we got rebates at the end of the year, not a huge amount, but we got some money back for our performance. So that was it. So the judge said if you perform the same or similar manner, the people get the discounts. The drug manufacturers appealed to the appeals court in Chicago, the court of Richard Posner, who was a former economist at University of Chicago, a devotee of Milton Friedman, and guess what? Judge Posner ruled in our favor.
Nice.
The drug companies then appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case, and they sent it back to the lower courts. But for all intents and purposes, the end result was a settlement for $725 million, which at that time was the largest settlement in American antitrust history by a private actor.
Did you have to split that 725 with anybody?
Well, the lawyers got a nice chunk. I think they got.
No, I'm just joking. It wasn't all for you. I know that.
No. 40,000 pharmacies split the money, and it was not split equally. It was split by invoice. And who had the most invoice? Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid. So the average pharmacy got $13,000 or $14,000.
Okay. That seems like a lot to someone. $14,000 doesn't make up for all those years of taking it in the shorts, basically.
No, and guess how much Walgreens, Rite Aid, and CVS contributed to our cause?
I would guess nothing.
Not a dime.
Oh, well, knowing this the Booby Prize, the lesson is we are as independent as we need be, and got to stay that way, because the big corporations will get you every time. And that's if you have a local pharmacist and you could avoid Walgreens and the big CVS wherever you are, support that person, him or her, and
I can tell you right now, there is only one independent pharmacy left in the city of Alameda, city of 75,000 people. You've got a couple of Walgreens, you got a couple of CVS's, Rite Aid pulled out, and Safeway has a couple stores, a couple pharmacies. There's only one independent pharmacy, and it's Versailles Pharmacy at Encinal Hardware. And the reason it's in a hardware store is the family owns the hardware business. So the gentleman's able to survive because he doesn't have huge bills like
the overhead.
Right. The hardware store may pay his workers' comp, they pay the insurance, the fire and theft, they pay the electric bill.
And if you're walking down that street in Alameda, close to High Street, if I'm not mistaken, there are some wonderful antique stores that you can shop at. And we talk about living in Alameda, you and I, Jerry, but just that street has an incredible amount of charm. And if you could support those shops by just browse around. You'll find something. And
that store is at the corner of Encinal and Versailles. There's a little antique store right next door to them, and across the street going north, there's another antique store. You go to the Chestnut Station. There's a couple antique store. There's the Blue Bottle restaurant right there. There's a couple places to go look at antiques there too. So it's a nice drive along there. It really is.
Yes. Yes.
So
Jerry, tell me about baseball a little bit, real quick, about the A's and what's going on.
Yeah, the A's are in Toronto for a big 3-game series. Right now, the A's have won 4 out of the last 5. They had a stretch where they lost 7 in a row. The Yankees beat them up in the first 2 games of the 3-game series, of the 4-game series, excuse me. But they earned a split. They won the last 2 against New York. Frankie Montas went 7 innings, 2-hit ball. Paul Blackburn, total surprise, gave the A's 5+ innings, and the bullpen did its job. And then they went to Detroit. They pounded Detroit pitching, but they took 2 out of 3 in the second game, and so that was the one game that they lost in the last 5, and they were beat by Miguel Cabrera, who had 3 RBIs, 2 hits, and his 502nd home run, which was, the guy has 2,963 hits. He's 37 hits away from 3,000. But he's
a
first
certain
ballot,
future Hall of Famer.
First ballot, no question about it. 2-time MVP. He went to the World Series a couple times with the Tigers, and he won one with the Marlins. Just a winning ball player. But for the A's management, Billy Beane and David Forst engineered a couple of trades that brought him 3 first-class players. They got catcher Yan Gomes from the Marlins and Starling Marte. Starling Marte is leading the American League in hitting with a .320 average. He has 10 home runs. He has stolen, as an Oakland Athletic, 22 bases in 22 tries. And he leads them. I think he's got 47 stolen for the year. Leads the majors. And Josh Harrison is hitting slightly under 300. I think he's at 298. He had 3 hits in the first game with Detroit and 3 hits in the second game. Yesterday he was 0 for 5, but he shows you what he can do. And so that goes along with, and also the A's brought up Chris Davis from the Las Vegas Aviators. Davis, who hit 40 home runs 4 years in a row, was injured in Pittsburgh in 2019, about midway through the season. He never recovered in 2019. 2020, I think he hit 2 home runs and was lost at the plate. The A's traded him to Texas for Elvis Andrus, and he was hitting a .157 when the Rangers DFA'd him to designate him for assignment. The A's signed him to a minor league contract, and he went to the Aviators, and he had 10 home runs in 16 games. They said, we got to bring this guy back. In yesterday's game, he had it in his first pitch that he saw since he was an A. He hit a double into the left field that got caught under the wall, and so it was ruled a ground rule double. It would have scored 2 runs if it caromed off properly. So, and then he had a single later in the game. So his performance was, hey, if this guy's got anything left in the tank, he's really going to help the team down the stretch. And they have, 25, 26 games left. It's going to be the last 2 weeks of the season. They have 7 games left with the Seattle Mariners, 7. And the Mariners have given them a tough time all season. It's very important that they get their game going against the Mariners. Mitch Haniger from the Mariners has killed them. He loves seeing green and gold. And then they have 6 games with the Astros, and they finish the season with the Astros. Right now, they're 4.5 games behind the Astros, and if that stays the way it is, they're going to have, if they win 5 of the 6 games, they're still going to be a half game back of the Astros. They virtually have to sweep the Astros if they hope to win the division. And as far as the wild card goes, they had a chance to gain on Boston yesterday. Boston had 8 players on the COVID list, 4 position players, including Xander Bogaerts, and 4 their relievers were on the.
That's another topic. Are they required to be vaccinated in baseball?
I thought they were, but I guess not. I have no idea. I thought they were saying 85 or 90%. I don't think they had to be 100%, but they should be.
Why shouldn't it be 100%? Why should they not just send anybody home until they're ready to be vaccinated? I don't understand that.
Exactly. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers announced that they're 100% vaccinated, which means Tom Brady is vaccinated. They weren't sure about Brady if he was going to be an anti-vaxxer, but he got vaccinated. And the
union should demand it. The unions should absolutely, not just the owners are going to go for whatever makes the owners the most money. Part of it is treating the players like a piece of meat. The union it's just not how much money you make, it's how you treat it as a human being. And the unions should come to bat and say, look, be vaccinated or don't play. That's all.
What would happen, God forbid, if one superstar got didn't get vaccinated and died. It's
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Who wants to think about it?
Tom Seaver died of COVID-19. There's rumors that that Henry Aaron died of COVID-19. No reason to go on. I mean, this is absolutely nuts with mankind, and it stems from political, and we can't go into it anymore because I don't need blood pressure medicine, but I soon will if we keep talking about it. Jerry, next time we'll talk about the stadium issue. It's been fun, and I love having you.
Okay, and I will see you sometime Tuesday afternoon.
That'd be really nice. I look forward to that.
Yeah, probably, maybe 1:32, and we'll have a nice chat then on our own. And my final thoughts are get vaccinated and get over it. No one's stealing your freedom. And if you fail to wear a mask and you die, you have no freedom. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Speaking of pipes and smoking it, we won't speak of pipes and smoking. We won't ever speak of pipes and smoking it. It won't do me any good, so why bother? But happy trails, everybody, if that'll give you a hint, and adios. Be well, bye-bye. Jerry.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.